Welcome to the segment where I review movies past and present, examining them from a variety of perspectives, including the subjective, psychological, and personal. Informative and occasionally funny, this is LoganLand Rants. Hey viewers, today we're going to talk about the 2019 film that likely got all of us horrified, in the good way. It's Midsommar. Not 100% sure how to pronounce it, I've heard it pronounced both ways. So today we're going to talk about the 2019 film Midsommar. Now, it's a horror film directed by a guy named Ari Aster, and produced by A24 Studios, which has had a great string of independent hits, or at least well-reviewed independent hits, everything from Spring Breakers to 8th Grade. And this year they created, well, the past 2 years, like 2018 in addition to 8th Grade, they created Hereditary, which I heard got really good reviews, and I definitely need to see. Maybe it'll be the subject of an episode a little ways down the road, once I actually see it, and maybe it'll retroactively make Midsommar a little better. But for now, we're going to talk about Midsommar because that's the frame of reference I have. Midsommar is great because it's so terrifying and makes you so uncomfortable in all the best ways. There are some moments that could definitely, like if you're not a fan of horror movies, like if you don't like being uncomfortable with the grotesque crap that happens and all the, there's some nudity in there, so if you don't like movies with nudity, this definitely isn't for you. Especially really weird. Like, it's hard to describe the scene unless you've seen it, but it's a really weird and very uncomfortable nude scene that I would not suggest for anyone. But the thing about Midsommar is it's very uncomfortable and very dark, which is odd because it takes place in broad daylight for most of the movie, because in case you haven't heard the premise of Midsommar, it's basically about a group of college kids led by a dysfunctional couple, to put it mildly. A toxic relationship, anyway. And they go to their exchange student friend and his little pagan getaway, essentially. Well, it's more like a festival. At least that's what they're told. And then it gets really terrifying really quickly. It's honestly quite crazy how brutal it gets. And, people in horror movies are going to make stupid decisions to begin with. That's just how horror movies work. People are not logical in horror movies. They make mistakes, and, it gives them a degree of humanity, and not everyone thinks the same way, so that kind of justifies the stupid decision of the horror movie. But I digress. Midsommar, the characters stay even after learning of the horrifying rituals, which I won't spoil here, because they're working on a very college-level doctorate thesis, and they keep making mistakes. The longer they stay, the more their days are numbered, And director Ari Aster has famously described this as a breakup movie disguised as a folk horror movie. And actually, one of my favorite reviews of the movie describes it as the horror movie equivalent of a destination wedding. And another tweet called it R-rated Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which I assume anyone who's listening to this had seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, if not Midsommar. But with all that in mind, Midsommar is a very interesting and very dark ride that when it gets to its inevitable conclusion, you just feel it, and it's such a slow burn and really well done. That being said, because of the brutality and grotesqueness and gruesomeness and literally all synonyms you can describe to it, it's definitely not for everyone. Like, I would not suggest this for every single person on the planet. In fact, if you're a fan of horror movies, I think you'll love this generally. But if you're not, then stay away. Just stay away. If you don't like brutality in movies, then this isn't for you, especially since the violence in Midsommar hits pretty close to home. And some of the more nude scenes I mentioned earlier, they also hit close to home, but in a very weird way. The characters are on drugs. It's a real hoot. But I wouldn't suggest watching it if you're not a fan of that crap. So moving on, Midsommar is very psychologically disturbing and definitely subjective, like I mentioned earlier. And I think it'll definitely resonate with you if you've had a bad breakup, because it was originally pitched, as Ari Aster put it, like a folk slasher film. But then they added breakup elements, like it's like a deteriorating relationship. That's mainly what the movie's about. And it gets worse and worse as the movie goes on. And you feel bittersweet, I'd say. It's more like when the inevitability happens, because it's a breakup movie. It like goes to its inevitable conclusion. And I mentioned this in an outtake of the earlier Joker review, that spoilers are often not that bad. Because if you know the twist going in, you'll be looking for stuff and be like, oh, that makes more sense. It'll make you enjoy the movie more, is what I'm saying. I'm still not going to spoil anything on Midsommar here, because I know potential viewers could get pretty angry about that. So, listeners, sorry. I don't know why I keep saying viewers. But anyway, Midsommar is very dark in all the ways I mentioned before, and it's definitely a must-see for horror fans, especially fans of Ari Aster's early film, Hereditary, so I've been told. And I need to watch it another time, because apparently if you watch it more than once, you need to watch the walls, like literally watch the walls, like you'll know it if you've seen Midsommar more than 3 times, weirdo. And if you know, not weirdo, you're fine. But if you've seen Midsommar more than 3 times, you'll notice that there's a lot of foreshadowing on the walls of the pagan buildings the characters go to. And that's worth noting, because Midsommar is really good at world building. Not just in the Tolkien sense, like Lord of the Rings. It's not that kind of world. It's more a world of, like, community, like, small-scale world. What's a good example? Like, a world within a world. Like, think Harry Potter, but different. It's like a secret world not many people know about, at least not the characters we're introduced to. And then, bang, bang, boom, we're introduced to a world, we get our story. It's a really effective story, and with well-drawn, if a little under-agreeable characters. Horror movies, the characters are always going to be a little thinly veiled compared to real-life people, but, you know, they're still well-sketched characters. Like, even if you don't have to agree with anything the characters do in the movie, but you do have to understand where they're coming from. And I think that's often overlooked in screenwriting, and Midsommar does not overlook that here. The characters have a clearly parasitic relationship that deteriorates over the course of the movie, and for good reason. Like, that's the only thing resembling a spoiler I'm going to tell you here. But Midsommar is really effective for all those reasons, and there's a lot of layers you could pull out of that whole theme onion. And yes, I use the term theme onion to describe layers in a theme. Changed my mind. Midsommar is really effective in all the ways I mentioned, but like I said, it's certainly not going to be for all viewers. Like, it's very well made and all that, but sometimes being well made is irrelevant if you don't like what the film has to say or don't like the content within the film. So just take all that with a grain of salt. And as far as I know, there could be a lot more that I have to say about Midsommar, and I'll be kicking myself later. Who knows? Maybe I'll make a part 2. Let me know in the comments, if there are any comments. I'm just doing this for fun. What do I care? But if you want to see more of this stuff, please pledge to my Patreon, usual outro stuff. And this has been LoganLand Rants. I hope you enjoy, and if you like horror movies, go see Midsommar. Later.